once again to Refill 100. This time we have a very special presentation and a very special presence. We have with us Julia Boyd, a writer, a historian who has written plenty of stories, who has written plenty of books, and who has many things to tell us, to share with us, and from which we all can learn. So let us start by welcoming Julia. Julia, welcome to Refill 100.
Thank you, I'm delighted to be here.
Well, Refill 100 is a small initiative that tries to share with our audience meaningful ideas, significant ideas. And first of all, we would like to ask you, who is Julia Boyd, in a few words?
That's a very good question. I'm never quite sure myself. Well, I've had a very varied life. I'm now 76, so I'm quite ancient. And I grew up in England mainly, but I didn't go to university. I worked at the Victoria and Albert Museum, which I enjoyed very much. And then I married a diplomat, so we lived abroad, including New York and Germany and Hong Kong and Japan. And then we spent 10 years at Cambridge, where my husband was master of one of the colleges. And so it's been a very varied life, and I've done all sorts of different things. But I have to say that writing has given me the most satisfaction, I think.
Okay. And how many books has Julia Boyd written?
Well, altogether, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm just finishing my 7th book, and I'm just about to begin my 8th book.
Excellent. And out of those books, has Julia Boyd received prizes for any of the books, acknowledgements from institutions, schools, any other places of recognition?
Well, that's a very kind question. I did, much to my astonishment, and it really was complete astonishment, I did win the Los Angeles Times History Prize, which was a great boost to my morale, because perhaps because I didn't go to university and I've never had any formal training, so I certainly wouldn't call myself really a professional historian, but so I've never really had a lot of confidence, but winning a prize like that made me think, well, somebody must like what I'm writing, so that was a great boost to me.
Okay, good. You are here visiting Waterloo. Yesterday we had a great moment visiting the different let's say fields where Napoleon, unfortunately for him, lost the Battle of Waterloo. And we were with other friends who were also historians and showing us the place. Is there anything that yesterday you learned and you would like to highlight?
Well, yes, I did once know about Waterloo, but I'd forgotten so much of the detail, and it brought it so alive. I think the thing that made me sad, though, is human nature. So many things have changed over the centuries, but one thing never seems to change, and that is human beings are always fighting each other. And you know, it's very easy to get caught up in the fascinating detail of the Battle of Waterloo, but I kept thinking the whole time of the agony and misery and, you know, to the wounded being left there for days, and the sheer horror of it, really. So I think while we can all become very interested in these extraordinary battles and the human stories and the who was where and who made what decision, and I must say, yesterday, seeing the slope where the British soldiers lay out of sight, which I knew about, but actually being there made it very exciting. But I don't think one can ever forget that underneath all the interest and excitement of battles and wars is human misery.
Okay, well, that misery indeed seems to be behind us, and we seem to be looking for it at one point or another. And it is precisely in that context that you will be talking about your two books that I have here tonight. And the title of the first one is called A Village in the Third Reich. And the second one is Traveling in the Third Reich. Can you tell us about what are these books all about?
Well, really what they're about is trying to understand better how the rise of the Nazis and the Second World War could have happened. Because you can read wonderful history books. In fact, there are probably more books written about this subject in my lifetime than any other. But I suppose what I was trying to do was to really understand a bit more what it was like for, I don't much like using the phrase ordinary people, but not the generals, not the politicians, but people like us. What were we thinking? How were we feeling? How was it possible that Germans, nice, interesting, intelligent Germans could... I think that was part of my motive. And by really digging deep into looking for letters, looking for diaries, things that people were saying and thinking at the time, you do begin to get a sense of why people decided to do the things they did, why they reacted the way they did. And so I suppose, in a nutshell, what I try to do is to take a great big slab of history, and history doesn't come in much bigger slabs than the Third Reich, and then look for the human stories, the individual stories, and try and weave that into the bigger picture. So you get some sense of what it was like to be there in that particular place at that moment.
Okay, and is you see because the book is about a village in the Third Reich, but is that particularly inspiring to you? Was there any particular reason that inspired you to go through the pains of writing the book?
Well, neither book was my idea. In fact, when the first book was the Travellers in the Third Reich book, and when that was suggested to me, I said, "Oh, don't be so silly. I don't know anything about the Third Reich, and there are so many books about the subject already." But for me, one of the great delights about writing is I love going into archives. I love finding the primary sources, and because I like doing that, I couldn't resist, going and having a look. And I just found so much material, and so that book happened. Not my idea; it had been suggested to me, and then I thought, well, that's it. I've finished with the Third Reich and with Germans. But then I was approached by somebody, a German lady whose village is Oberstdorf, right down in the bottom of Germany. And she had herself written a book about her village in the Second World War, but she felt that it was an interesting enough story that it should be made available to a wider public by being written in English. So, in fact, I wrote a very different book from her book, but I couldn't have written my book without her help and guidance, and also her own research, which was wonderful. So the pair of us produced this second book about her village, and it was very different. The first book was trying to use as many different people from as many different backgrounds as possible who were travelling in Germany in the 1930s, and to get their take coming from many different angles. With the village book, it was the opposite. I was looking at one small village and trying to get into the minds of the people who lived there and try to get a sense of why some of them, not all of them by any means, fell for Hitler, why others resisted. But there were lots of people in the middle who started off supporting Hitler, but then when National Socialism really took a grip, realised they'd made a mistake And so those people I found particularly interesting, and I suspect that there were millions of Germans in that who can be described like that. But of course, it was no good having doubts about Hitler and the Nazis, because once they were in power, they had such a grip, and if you protested or if you tried to resist in any way, you could very easily end up in a concentration camp or dead. So I was really trying to get a real sense through people's diaries and letters and interviews how that could have happened and how they had felt about that terrible part of their history.
Okay. A bit earlier, I suggested that imagination plays a big role in the production of knowledge and history, but in your books there is not really imagination. You rather corrected me and suggested that it was not imagination, but rather the sense of empathy. Could you elaborate what is the technique, what is the method used by Julia Boyd to be writing their history books?
I would never correct you, Jesus, but the only reason I slightly resisted the word imagination is that this is not, neither of these books do I use anything that isn't established fact, or if I do, I will make it very clear. So I don't have enough imagination. I'm not clever enough to write, say, for instance, a historical novel. So I would say, rather than imagination, I think the thing that's most important for me as a writer, and I don't sit down and think this consciously, but looking back on the way I work, I think it's true. It's empathy is the word. I think what I find, before I can actually write, I have to really feel myself there. I have to put myself in the minds of these people. And the way I do that is by reading the things that they were writing at the time, which inevitably comes down to letters and diaries and interviews at the time maybe, and also reading lots of newspapers, especially sometimes the correspondence columns give you a real sense of, because people write to newspapers when they feel strongly about something. So you do get a real sense of how people were thinking and reacting. And of course it's very different to the way we think today. And that, I think, inevitably happens in any lifespan. I'm 76 now, so the way people were thinking about certain issues, social issues, when I was young, of course, have changed quite astonishingly to how they think and feel today. And no doubt in another 75 years, the same will be true.
And yet, the question will be whether we, the public, have learned something from history. We see this terrible tragedy that has happened with Hitler and nationalism, and yet it seems that today we are getting back to a kind of similar ideology. Is that what Julia Boyd also see in what is happening in today's
Yes,
reality?
well, I'm very cynical, because I don't think we ever have or ever will learn from history, because I think a number of societies at different times and different places throughout history do try to make life better. They see a good code by which we should live, and they try to make that happen, but I fear human nature doesn't change. And it strikes me, and I know this is a rather sad view, but with what's going on in the world today, I'm afraid it seems to be true, is that certainly people have always fought for land, for domination, for what somebody else has got, and that doesn't ever seem to change. It sort of happens in different forms and different places, and the weapons get ever more destructive and horrible. But I think I put my hope in societies, in governments, when occasionally they will, not always, and just when you think you're heading in the right direction, then it will suddenly go into reverse. But I think the world is full of wonderful people who are full of kindness and want to make a better world, but it gets harder and harder, it seems, to achieve that. But I think the word I hang on to more than any other word is kindness. I think we just have to try and be kind to each other. Even if it doesn't seem to make an impact on the wider picture, we should wake up every morning and think, I must remember, I must be kind. And it is not a very deep or amazing thought, that, but I cannot say where we are in June 2025 that the world is looking very cheerful, and it certainly doesn't look as if we've learnt anything from history from where I'm standing.
Okay, yes, that's quite remarkable, your observations, your feelings, and yet, because we work with the young people, because we are working with the new generations, and because hopefully we, older people than the new generations, can share with them some hope,
yes,
some ideas. What would be the message of Julia Boyd to these young generations?
Well, I believe in them. They are the people who can make a difference. We just have to go on trying. It's never going to be easy, and there are even more challenges now with climate change and so on. But as I say, I think weaving kindness into your daily behaviour and thinking about other people, and just hoping that our governments will find ways of moving forward to make the world a better place. But it's up to young people, and there are so many good young people around. There's so many young people who give so much of their free time to doing good things for others. So there is always hope, and the hope always has to lie with the next generation.
Thank you so much. We have learned plenty of things. Dear friends, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you so much for watching this interview. Please continue following the ideas that we share through Refill 100, and of course, we hope to see you again in our next program. See you next time. Bye now.
Goodbye.